Our chief Washington correspondent Peter Cook is here in New York, standing by with the House Democratic Leader Nancy Pelosi. Peter?
Mark, thanks very much. I am joined by the House Democratic Leader Nancy Pelosi. Welcome to New York. Welcome back to Bloomberg.
Thank you.
Let me ask you, beginning first with the debt ceiling debate. We had the Treasury Secretary of the United States announce today we've essentially maxed out our credit card. He can move some things around until August 2nd to avoid default. What's the risk right now that we're going to push this thing all the way to August 2nd?
Well, I hope that we can resolve it long before then. And that's one of the reasons I'm in New York with Leader Clyburn, my associate in the Congress, as well as Chris Van Hollen, our leader on the Budget Committee, who are the two people at the table with the Vice President and with our Republican colleagues, House and Senate, to reduce the deficit, to resolve the issue of not being in default of our loan. And I would hope to do that much earlier than the deadline.
You met with business leaders today. Obviously, they must have shared some of their concerns with you. Have you told them to be ready for the worst or to be more optimistic?
Well, no, I'm optimistic always. I asked them for their cooperation and their candor, which they were very generous with. I think it's very clear that we cannot find ourselves in this situation again. How we go about this will be very important to preventing that from happening. But we cannot default on the loans. And B, we must reduce the deficit. There's some suggestions about revisiting our tax code, lowering the corporate rate, perhaps the individual rate as well, as we simplify and make our tax code fair.
Are you open to that?
I have been open to it for a very long time. There are initiatives about how we cut what we must cut without cutting growth. We have to invest in education and innovation so that our country continues to be number one. But we have to, again, make very definite cuts. So we must invest in growth. We must cut where we can. We must rid ourselves of waste, fraud, and abuse. We must look at revenues as well.
Speaker Boehner was here a week ago. He spoke to the Economic Club of New York, and he laid down his lines in the sand. Spending cuts in the trillions of dollars, budget reforms, and absolutely no increase in taxes. Can you get there to the same place with John Boehner?
No, I believe that what the Speaker was proposing is really a blueprint for planned obsolescence of the American economy. You cannot succeed and grow and be number one and innovate if you're not investing in education and the rest. We have to make the right investments. What I heard from the business leaders today was an openness to the balance that we must have between spending cuts and increases in revenue, but done in a way that is fair. And also, if all of these things are done, if everybody is sharing the pain of this, then everybody will share the pain of it. In other words, they don't want to bear the brunt, but they're willing to do their share. It has been an interesting day for us in that respect. I'm sorry, many of them said at the end of the day, they realize that it will be spending cuts and revenue changes.
How worried are you that President Obama is going to sit in these negotiations with Republicans? To some extent, they've been driving the negotiations. They've been putting their lines in the sand. And at the end of the day, he's going to offer up a deal that's going to be perhaps not acceptable to your fellow House Democrats. You guys had some problems with what he negotiated back in December. Is he about to give away the store again?
And just recently. No, here's the point. I don't think that Speaker Boehner, with all due respect to his line in the sand, ever said, and I guarantee you then the Republicans in the Congress will vote to lift the debt ceiling or to not go into default. He just said this is what we are demanding. They didn't have the votes on the continuing resolution. They haven't had the votes each step of the way. So we're going to have to be at the table if we're going to produce the votes. But more important than that, we have to do what is right for the American people. It has to be job creating, has to, in our view, lower taxes, create jobs, reduce the deficit, strengthen the middle class. And we think that there's a bipartisan way to do it. My colleagues who sit in the bipartisan meeting with the Vice President say the tenor of the meeting is very positive and open.
You talked about lowering taxes, being open to lowering corporate taxes, for example, as long as you get rid of deductions. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, you're talking about closing some of the special interest. Really, they are earmarks. Some people call them tax expenditures, taxes that cost us something. Some call it revenue earmarks. But the Simpson-Bowles Commission called it revenue earmarks, and they said if you close them, you can take down the corporate rate. that would be fair. You're not lowering the revenue we receive. You're just making it more
But you
fair.
still believe that the Bush tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans, those couples, individuals earning more than $200,000 a year, those should be phased out, and the president shouldn't sign anything that keeps to that?
I myself am a little bit of a different place. First of all, it's $250,000 for a couple, but I'd be willing to take it to $1 million. You know, for couples making over $1 million would. But again, nothing is agreed to until everything is agreed to. And it's not just to say that couples making over $1 million will bear the brunt of this. They will share the burden with other people as we make cuts and look at other sources of revenue. But I'm more in the $1 million and above because I think that's where the serious money is, and it doesn't threaten some people who are making $250,000 as a couple. You know, I think it's a clear distinction. But again, it's not just about them. It's about how we all broaden the base of our responsibility to fund the government and create jobs, grow the economy, strengthen the middle class.
Entitlement programs, Republicans say Democrats are still resistant to major changes to Medicare and Medicaid, despite the fact that these are programs that right now are going to be insolvent in not too long. Are you willing to put real Medicare changes on the table, for example, increasing the retirement age?
When we're talking about Medicare, let me be very clear, because we are open to many, we're listening to every suggestion. But one suggestion we're not open to is the abolishment of Medicare, and that's what the Republicans have put forth in their budget, and we do not support that. So every initiative that we have where federal dollars are spent must be subjected to scrutiny to make sure we're getting our money's worth and the public is well served. But abolishing Medicare, that is not on the table. Considering some changes in funding and the rest, that's a different story. You can't take that off the table. But again, we got in this situation where we had tax cuts for the wealthiest people in our country, which did not create jobs. In the first year of the Obama administration, more jobs were created in the private sector than in the 8 years of the Bush administration, with all of the tax cuts that President Bush had. It was also 2 unpaid-for wars, a prescription drug bill that gave away the store to the pharmaceutical industry. That's what got us here. Okay, let's put that behind us and go forward and not get in this situation again.
In our time, I mean, let me ask you a couple other quick issues. Dominique Strauss-Kahn, you've seen the news here. I don't necessarily want to ask you about what's happened with his personal situation. I want to ask you, if he goes, who should run the International Monetary Fund? Should it be someone from an emerging market economy as opposed to someone from Europe?
Well, I have long been one who has said that all of those post-World War II international financial institutions that came forth, whether it's the World Bank or the IMF or the other regional development banks, really should all be subjected to a discussion as to whether they are accomplishing their goal, their original purpose, or if in these more modern times, if they're the appropriate way to go. I don't have a suggestion. I know they moved quickly to replace them temporarily in any event. But
would you have trouble if that went to someone from China?
Well, I don't even know that it depends on who we're talking about and the rest. But yeah, I probably would have a problem with that. But again, let's hear what the suggestion is. I think we have a bigger issue, which is what is the purpose of the fund? This incident, as I said, has given new meaning to the word moral hazard. We have very difficult challenges with the international financial crisis, where the IMF, which is an important player there, and we have this personnel problem. It's really very, very unfortunate. But it also points out that we have to make sure that the IMF is doing what it was intended to do. And let's just see where it goes. I've had some problems with some of the funding from the World Bank and 2 projects in China which have resettled people in Tibet, for example. You don't want to go into all of that. But again, everything is open to discussion as we go forward.
Leader Pelosi, thank you for the time. Appreciate you joining us here on Bloomberg, and have a safe trip back to Washington.